This show is brought to you by Prolific, the growth firm. When growth stalls, CEOs turn to Prolific to plan, execute, and achieve what's next.
One piece of advice I would give to people is work in city government and as a waiter or waitress. I think that those two things, when you've worked in a restaurant and you've worked in city government, you understand how things are done. And I think it's been really great knowledge to have, both with connections and just institutional knowledge of how a city is run, how tight a city budget is. And it gives you a lot of respect for those who are leading our communities.
Hi, I'm Dave Neff, host of Talent Scout. On this show, we shine a light on Indiana's next generation of leaders who are making a difference in business, community, and civic life. These are real conversations about purpose, mentorship, and building a future that matters. Join me as we invest in leadership that lasts. Welcome back to the Talent Scout. My guest today is Sarah Holsapple, who I've had the pleasure of knowing. I think the first time I met you, Sarah, was in 2016. At the grand opening for Refinery 46. I remember my friend Brian Shutt was opening, and you were there kind of making sure, like, I think the mayor was there, just all of the podium was set. There were some remarks, and I was running Edge Mentoring at the time, and Brian connected us afterwards, and we ended up working together a little bit on Edge and EdgeX, and so it's been fun over the last almost decade. Our families have gotten to know each other and see what you're doing, not only as a wife, a mom, but as a business owner and leader in this community. So thanks for being on Talent Scout today.
Thank you. Good memory.
Yeah.
I forgot that was the first time we met. So thanks for having me.
Well, let's get into a little bit of your story. You're not a native Hoosier, right? You weren't born here. So tell us maybe a little bit about your childhood, where you were born, where you grew up. What was life like growing up in the household of your family?
Yeah, so I am from Dayton, Ohio, originally Kettering, Ohio, a suburb of Dayton, and I grew up the youngest of three kids. I have two older brothers, and I had a great childhood. My family is very close. My parents are they were the best parents, and just kind of always instilled in us that we can do anything we want and be anything we want. And they really helped, shape me into who I am today. I consider myself a Hoosier now because I've actually lived in Indiana longer than I lived in Ohio. I went to IU and was attracted to IU because I wanted to be a broadcast journalist. And I also wanted to go to a big school. And I kind of wanted to get away from Ohio and all my friends who were doing the same thing, going to Ohio State or University of Dayton or Ohio Northern. So I decided to do something different, graduated in a class of almost 1,000 kids and was the only one from my graduating class who went to IU.
Wow.
And so I didn't know anyone at IU when I stepped foot on the campus, and, of course, now regard it as 4 of the most pivotal years of my life and have stayed in Indiana ever since.
Wow. So met your husband at IU, right?
We met there, yes, at the Upstairs Pub.
Okay.
If anybody went to IU, you'll know exactly. That needs no explanation. So
who made the first move is what I want to know. Who went up and introduced?
You've not heard this? Is a great
I think
story.
I might have heard, but I want you to tell it. Yeah.
So long story short, one of Casey, my husband's friends, came up to me at the Upstairs Pub and said, "My friend over there thinks you're cute." I looked over. The feeling was mutual. So we kind of kept making eyes at each other throughout the evening. And then I think I had enough liquid courage to walk up to him. And I said that I know that you think I'm cute because your friend told me. And so now would be a good time to ask for my phone number because I'm getting ready to leave the bar. So he did. And we dated. And then we've been married now. It'll be 16 years in January. So it worked.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, Casey had the ball like on the tee, it sounds like, just the way you served that up. So 16 years almost, 3 kids, right?
We have 3 kids, yeah.
Ages?
They are 11, I have to think, 11, 9, and 6.
Okay.
3 kids, 3 pets.
Yeah.
It's a big happy family.
You just had a recent pet.
We got a new dog.
Right? Okay.
Yes, like this past weekend. We're done with animals and with children.
All right. Well, full disclosure, both of our kids go to the Oaks Academy, amazing school, and so it's fun to have some overlap with you guys in that realm as well. Okay, so you get to IU, 4 years there, meet your husband there. Talk to us about what were you involved with? I believe you were in a sorority. What were some of the extracurriculars at IU?
Yeah, I was involved in a sorority, and so the extracurriculars were basically whatever the sorority event was that particular weekend. I was also a journalist for the IU, the IU school. Well, I was a journalism major, and the School of Journalism had a television studio, and so I reported for the TV station and anchored. So I did that on the side, which was actually when I was leaving the bar the night I met Casey. I had to go home early so that I could be on the news the next morning.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so those were the things. I mean,
Yeah.
I wasn't really, I wasn't an athlete, wasn't
Yeah.
involved in any sort of intramural sports, but just took part in everything else that IU had to offer.
Now, the time span you were there, I believe IU basketball played in the national
They
championship.
did.
Is that right?
Yes, they
did
did.
you go to the game or the Final Four or anything like that?
I didn't go to the
Okay.
game. I remember very distinctly where I was when we watched and seeing them lose. But it was, IU was kind of at its prime at that time, and it was so fun. I did not miss a basketball game. I never went to a football game. And now it's kind of, the football games are where it's at. So that's really fun to see IU have kind of made that turn.
The tables have turned, although there's always hope with IU basketball.
I hope
right?
so.
New
I hope
coach
so.
and-
Yeah.
So, so you're doing some work as an undergrad, working at the student broadcast station news. Tell us about. I know you started your career as a television reporter. So obviously, you went there. You actually decided to get into the field that you were studying at IU. Talk to us about that first job and sort of how that opportunity came about. Where was it located? And I know you were in a few different markets, I believe, as a television reporter.
Yeah, so as a journalist, you start out in small markets, and at the time, we were literally sending resume tapes. Like for people who are listening, those are plastic, things that used to go into a VCR. They probably aren't familiar, maybe some of them, with what that actually is, but it quite literally was a resume tape with a video of me on camera, and I sent them all over the country to Billings, Montana, and Marquette, Michigan, and I was willing to go anywhere. My first job offer actually came from Marquette, Michigan, and I ended up turning that one down. So I technically wasn't willing to go anywhere. It was a little too far when I went to the UP. Beautiful up there, but just a little too far.
Yeah.
So my second job offer I ended up taking in Terre Haute, which was perfect because it was about 4 hours from home and only about an hour and a half from IU, where Casey was in law school. And it's my first job. I made $18,500. And I remember when I called my dad and mom to tell them that was the salary, he asked if that was like the annual salary for, is that the whole year? But that's what you do as a journalist. You start out small in a small market and you work your way up. I then went from Terre Haute to Evansville, Indiana, and was in Evansville for about 2.5 years. The salary was slightly better there. But my dream was always to get to Indianapolis. Some journalists want to go to Chicago or Boston or New York, but I just really wanted to end up in Indy. I liked the size of the city, the size of the market, and Casey was studying law here. So I made the move, fortunately, from Evansville to Indy in 2009 and have been in Indianapolis ever since.
Wow. So when you came to Indy, you were working for which station?
I was working for WRTV, and at the time I was the youngest journalist in the market, and the veterans let me know it.
I
had
a little bit of hazing.
I certainly had to earn my keep pretty quickly.
So from that role, I believe you pivoted into Mayor Ballard's administration. Is that right? Talk to us about how that came about.
Yeah, after about 6 years as a journalist, I really decided that I loved that I did it. I was glad that I did. The experience I had was certainly very unique, but it wasn't a job that I felt like would support the lifestyle I ultimately wanted to have, which was to have children and flexibility, candidly. I mean, when you're a journalist, sometimes you're working, and I was, nights, weekends, and holidays. And so I just didn't have the passion to make the sacrifice any longer. But I wanted to stay working with the media. So a job opening came up at the Department of Public Works under Mayor Greg Ballard. Ballard as the spokesperson, which was perfect because the Department of Public Works, if you don't know, is in charge of everything that sort of moves in the city. So trash removal, snow removal. At the time, they were in charge of the water and wastewater department. So journalists had a lot of questions. There was always
the roads or the roads part,
resurfacing, bridges, sidewalks, all of that.
Yeah.
So, and Mayor Ballard was putting a lot of money into that infrastructure. So I was constantly getting phone calls from media, and I felt like it was a great pivot because I was still able to work with the media, but I didn't have to work the grueling hours that, I had been working at the television station. And I'd made a lot of connections having worked in the media. So it was a really natural fit. And Mayor Ballard, I can't say enough great things about him.
Now, did you ever have sort of the dream or the notion that maybe I'd work in politics or city government? Or was it more just, no, I was, a reporter and this opportunity just came along and then you thought about it? Talk to us about kind of that decision, because I think being in public service, whether it's local, state, it's critical. But is that something that is always been near and dear to your heart, or how did that come about?
My minor in college was political science, so I always had an interest in politics, and I would say I still have an interest in and maybe at some day, running for something. I don't know what, but what really opened my eyes working for the city was if I ever did run for something, I would want it to be at the local level. So school board, city council, I don't know, maybe the mayor someday. But absolutely. I felt like you make more of an impact at the local level than any other. And so, at least in my opinion. So but I wouldn't rule that out. Yeah. And I did have an interest then, and, I still do now.
Well, the roster of talent that I feel like has come out of Mayor Ballard's administration, you think about some of those names that are leading key organizations or have led, the Ryan Vaughns or Michael Hubers or Brandon Brown. So, Jason Cloth, there's a lot of really cool folks, just talented folks that have gone on, including yourself, to do pretty incredible things in this community. So
yeah, I was surrounded by certainly a really deep bunch of talent. I learned a lot when I was there. One piece of advice I would give to people is work in city government and as a waiter or waitress. I think that those two things, when you've worked in a restaurant and you've worked in city government, you understand, how things are done. And I think it's been really great knowledge to have, both with connections and just institutional knowledge of how a city is run, how tight a city budget is. And it gives you a lot of respect for those who are leading our communities.
That's a great piece of advice. So for those young folks listening out there, work as a waiter or waitress or in city government or both. Okay. Yeah. One question I wanted to ask, as those 6 years as you were a reporter, who's the most famous / interesting person or two that you had the chance to interview?
So I interviewed both Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton when they were stumping through Indiana, the one time we were a swing state. So they were both running, and they came through Evansville, and I had an opportunity to interview both of them. When I interviewed, President Obama, he was it was a group setting, and the producer said, make sure you get a question in, whatever you have to do, talk louder than everybody else. Like, we need you to ask a question on camera. And I have a very cool photo of a friend of mine who worked at the newspaper, and she saw as I was getting my question asked and answered, and she thought enough to take a photo, and I still have that picture. So that's pretty cool. He's looking right at me, and I'm asking. I don't have any idea what I asked.
What question you asked? That was going to be my next question.
I think I probably just yelled something louder than everybody else so that he would turn and answer. Yeah. And then I did get to interview Senator Clinton also when she came through a couple weeks after him. And in that situation, I got to interview her one-on-one, which was really cool. Wow. One thing, I learned a lot about her, but mainly that she is very short. I'm only 5'4", and I was towering over her in this interview. So anyway, it was just very, pivotal moments in my career because I was chosen to do those interviews. They were high pressure interviews. In both cases, they were live. So, the questions that you're asking have to be sharp and crisp, and you also want to make sure that you're diplomatic and respectful. So there was a lot going through my head during those interviews, but it taught me a lot.
Wow. Anything stick with you about President Obama or Senator Clinton, just in terms of their presence or how they kind of interpersonally made you feel?
They both took the time. I will say, they were obviously very busy. They were obviously trying to get votes in all 92 counties. And here they were in Vanderburgh, which isn't even the largest.
Yeah.
And a young reporter, I think at the time I was probably, 25.
Yeah.
And so, Senator Clinton, especially, I do remember that she, even though her Secret Service was kind of waving her off to do the next interview, wanted to make sure that I got all of my questions answered. And I really appreciated that.
That's great. That's really cool. So, okay. So back to your career, you're in local government working with Mayor Ballard. I believe after that, you pivoted to Citizens Energy. Is that right? So talk to us about that transition, that opportunity. How'd that come about? Was it at the end of Mayor Ballard's, administration, or did he still have a couple years left?
It wasn't. It was after his first term. And so he still was mayor for several years after that. But during that time, as I mentioned, I was working for the Department of Public Works, and the Department of Public Works was over water and wastewater. And so Citizens Energy, there was a big moment in the city where Citizens Energy Group bought the water and wastewater utility from the city. And I was offered a job as part of that transition. And so I went to Citizens and was there for almost 7 years, doing the same thing as a spokesperson. Was no longer talking about streets and sidewalks, and was solely focused on water and wastewater and gas, that utility. But I learned a lot about utilities, again, about how the city works, and even working at Citizens, even though it's not a municipality, we were still responsible for a huge customer group, and complaints often made their way to me through the way of media, and so my eyes were opened to the right and wrong way to respond to an angry customer, and Citizens did it the right way every time.
Wow! And did you have your oldest child while you were still at Citizens?
Yes. So I had Henry when I was only a couple years into Citizens, and then I dropped down to, and I tell you this because it's important for the next transition, I started working just 4 days a week so that I could be at home one day. Then I had my daughter at Citizens and started working part-time. So I went down to just 3 days a week. And that's when I started to feel the pull that maybe I wanted to do something else that offered, I mentioned that flexibility piece earlier. I wanted something that maybe offered even more flexibility, where I could really be in control of my schedule entirely.
What was the impetus to sort of launch out? So after Citizens, you've got 2 young kids. You launch, at the time, Hollesapple Communications, now Line 1. We're going to talk about that. But did you come from a family of entrepreneurs, or what was that? I think anyone that's ever done anything entrepreneurially, right, there's a moment where you have to really bet on yourself. You have to believe in yourself. Also the product or service, right, that you're going to be, selling or pitching to others. But talk to us about, your young mom, right? You've worked for some great brands. What were those conversations like over the dinner table with your husband, Casey, of, hey, I think I want to start my own, PR media firm, relations firm?
Yeah, I do come from entrepreneurs. My dad and my brother, both my brothers, at the time, my oldest brother wasn't an entrepreneur, but he is now. And so I had seen them grow their own businesses, and I had seen and heard them talk about the challenges and, the rewards of that. So that always intrigued me. But really, it was about that. I felt like I had something that I could offer to the community. I'd worked with a lot of PR firms in my role at Citizens, so I knew how agencies worked and what I liked and what I didn't like. And I felt like I had something to offer to clients, and thought that I could probably just have 1 or 2 clients and replace the salary that I was making at Citizens. And candidly, Dave, that was the original intent. When I pitched it to Casey, quite literally at the dinner table, and said, I think I can do this on my own if I just land a couple of clients. I can replace, because it was just at that time a part-time salary. I can replace this. And he said, let's do it, and was supportive. And I was very intentional to tell citizens and be very upfront with them that this is what I'm planning to do. I stayed for about 6 weeks. And during that time was working on my website and meeting with people to tell them I was going to start my own thing. And then I did in April of 2017.
Wow. So was Citizens a first customer? Did they become a client?
No, and they still haven't.
Okay.
No, Citizens has a longstanding relationship with a firm that they still work with. So, but I'd love to work with them someday.
Yeah. Okay.
And I still have great connections and relationships with people there. And I think that's another piece of advice, start a job well and leave a job well.
Yeah.
It was an awkward conversation to have to call my boss. I asked him to go to breakfast with me at Cafe Patachou. And I remember he said, I knew you were either coming in. He thought I was coming in to just quit and decide that I was going to stay home.
Yeah.
He was surprised that I was coming in to tell him that I was leaving but starting my own business.
Yeah.
But I was upfront and honest. I wanted to give them an opportunity to handle that how they wanted, and they asked me to stay on for a little while.
Yeah, that is a great piece of advice. Honestly, I think people remember more how you leave a job than how you start a job, right? And so I think for anyone listening out there, sprint through the tape, right? Because it can be easy if you're sort of mentally checked out to maybe cut some corners on the way out. But I think people will remember that about you more than sort of your energy of the first week of a new job.
Yeah, I think so too. And especially now as an employer, I can tell you that that's absolutely true.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us here on Talent Scout. We're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor, so stay tuned. This episode is brought to you by Prolific, the growth firm, helping visionary leaders accelerate growth. This fall, we're bringing that mission to life with the Prolific Growth Summit, an exclusive one-day experience at Rally on September 24th in Indianapolis. Hear from world-class voices like Patrick Lencioni, Hobby Lobby founder David Green, Goldman Sachs Heidi Cruz, and NBA player and entrepreneur Jonathan Isaac. Join top CEOs and executives right here in our city. Learn more at prolificgrowthsummit.com. Okay, so 2017, at the time, you just launched out on your own, right?
All on my own.
Okay, you didn't have a partner.
I'm in my office, and I'm making cold calls.
Yeah.
And I named the company Hollesapple Communications because that's my last name, and I'm communicating. It seems like a good fit.
Yeah. Rolls off the tongue.
It rolls off the tongue. Yeah. So I was on my own for about a year and then decided that I'd probably need to hire a copy editor. And someone had reached out to show interest in that position. I hadn't posted it, but it just sort of the stars aligned. So I hired just someone to do some copy editing for me. And then it started to snowball because what started as I just want one or two clients, fortunately, I was getting calls and interest from a lot of people in the community, and I have a hard time saying no and putting the brakes on. So I started to hire more people, eventually hired someone who now is my business partner. And we are now 8.5 years later, a team of 9, probably growing more this year. So anyone who's listening, if you're interested in a job in PR, reach out. And we rebranded last year because we candidly just felt like the name Hollesapple Communications, which was all about, me at the time, was no longer indicative of our entire team and what we did and the services that we offered. So we rebranded to Line 1. And the thought behind that name is that the first line of a speech or of a press release or of a media interview is the most important, the Line 1. So rebranding is tough, but I'm glad it's over, and we're really happy with the way it turned out.
That's great. Well, I've had the privilege of not only working with Line 1, but meeting several of your team, and you guys have a rock star team.
Thank you.
Talk to us about the first year. Like, was it, hey, phone was ringing off the hook, we had, more clients that I could handle, I had to hire people, or were there like some doubts in that first year of like, Casey, did I make the right decision? Should I just go back and get a part-time job at a stable place? Like, what was it like trying to lock down those first few customers and managing the workload while having a young family?
The first, I feel like it's hard to tell this story because it sounds like dumb luck, but really I replaced what I was trying to replace salary-wise within the first 2 months of my business.
Yeah.
I was really blessed to have made really great connections in the community and had people reaching out and asking for help or referring me. I've had so many referrals throughout the years. So it didn't feel like I made the wrong decision from that standpoint. It felt stressful that I had no idea how to do a lot of things that business owners do.
Pricing, right? What do I charge for this?
Absolutely. Pricing, invoicing, I sending out proposals. I mean, I was doing it all by myself, whereas before I had team members to help me. So that's when I really thought, if I want to do this right and I want to be able to offer the level of service that I want to be able to offer, and oh, by the way, still maintain a family, and we knew we wanted more children, then I've got to hire people. But again, I had never hired anyone in my life. So there's a learning curve that came with that as well. But I never have felt in the past 8.5 years that I made the wrong decision. We'll probably talk about this, but my faith is very important to me. And Casey and I were very prayerful in this decision. And I feel like God opened doors for a reason, and it's continued to happen that way. And so I've never felt like I should have been doing something else.
That's amazing. What I'd love to talk a little bit. I know you've had some big, life changes in the last couple years. You lost someone incredibly close to you, your mother, and maybe talk to us about the influence that your mother had on you, both from a young age and even as an adult.
Yeah, my mom and I were very close, and she passed away unexpectedly last June. So it's been a little over a year now, and it truly, rocked me to the core. All of us. I mentioned earlier that my brothers and my dad and I are all very close, and we're a little bit lost still without mom guiding the way. And I'm very close with my dad as well, and we've become even closer over the last year. But there are just things about a mom that you can't replicate with any other relationship. And my mom stayed home with all three of us, and so I think that we had very different paths. And she used to tell me, "You make me tired. Like I watch you, and you make me tired." Like I'm just built more like my dad. But my mom helped me with learning how to be a mom, right? And learning how to show up for my kids. And she also, in the last year, I've really felt called to slow down. And I know that's coming from her. Say no to things more, be intentional with your time. And so I hate to ever say that there's a blessing that comes out of losing someone, because honestly, I think that sounds kind of cliche, but I do feel like I've changed a lot of the way that I show up in the world because of the way that I lost my mom.
Yeah. Well, it's, I've had a little bit of a view of just her influence on your life and the tributes you've paid to her, especially over the last year. And I know you know this, but I'm sure she's incredibly proud of all that you're continuing to do, and I know will do in the future. So
thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. So as you think about the last 20 years, since post IU, let's say,
oh my gosh, has it been that long?
I'm just doing some rough math, ballpark. What's a key discipline or maybe a habit, something that as you think about like, wow, this has really impacted my life, and something that you would attribute to, success, both professionally and personally? Is there a habit or two that you would really point to?
Yeah, a couple things. I am an early riser. I think it's really important for me to get up before the rest of the house when things are still calm, and I love to make a cup of coffee, and then I sit down with a devotional. Right now, I'm going through Jesus is Calling. It's just short little excerpts that I like to read, and then I do a quick journal about nothing. It doesn't have to be anything profound. But I'll just write down usually 3 or 4 things that I'm grateful for in the last 24 hours. that really sets the tone for my day. I've been doing that for almost 2 years, and it just, by the time then my kids get up and their whatever drama, ensues in the first 5 minutes of their feet hitting the floor, I feel a little more grounded to be able to help them. I also exercise a lot, and I think that really helps clear my mind. But
on
go
that
ahead.
real quick, sorry to cut you off. I had somebody tell me a few years ago, a mentor, that gratitude and anxiety cannot live in the brain at the same time, right? And so,
Right?
I haven't dug in on the science of it, but it makes sense to me, right? When we're in a grateful state, like you said, listing those 3 things every morning that you're grateful for. If you think about it, you're probably not super anxious, right? When you're
Yeah.
doing that, and you're focused more on sort of the things, the blessings that are in your life for a reason. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I try to keep them specific to the last 24 hours. Because I think if you sit down and you're just like, I'm going to write 3 things I'm grateful for,
Yeah.
well, it could be, that's too big for
Yeah.
me. So it's little. I mean, today I think my things were, one of the things I said I was grateful for was last night my daughter and I just sat in the kitchen and talked about school and how she's more excited about school this year than she was last year.
That's great.
And that's a conversation that it will be fun to flip back in the
Yeah.
journal and see someday that we had that. So
Yeah.
keep the list, keep it kind of
Yeah.
small.
Yeah. So journaling, devotional in the morning, exercise, anything else that you'd point to?
Yeah. Well, in the last 18 months, actually, I gave up alcohol.
Wow. Yeah.
And, there was no like rock bottom moment for me, but I just kind of felt like alcohol was taking more than it was giving. And I had days where I didn't feel well because I drank, and I decided that I would cut it out and see how it changed things. And it's been a great decision for me. So I know that's not for everyone, and that might feel really big for someone, but it's been, I think, honestly, one of the best decisions that I've made as an adult.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's part of a larger trend, right? It does seem like as you read, whether it's in Wall Street Journal, just alcohol consumption, especially amongst millennials and Gen Z, is down, I think, a bit. And alcohol sales are down in some. Now, I think boomers, it's rising, maybe because they're retired and just having a good time. But that's really cool and respectable. And I've been on a bit of a similar journey this year myself of just, I'm 40, I've got 4 young kids. And as much as I like to be social and entertain it, as we get a little bit older, the bounce back from having a couple drinks is not always as easy. And then, I mean, at its core, it could be a bit of a depressant, right? So then you're kind of maybe more anxious or even depressed on some things that are going on in life. And so that's also maybe in the last 18 months that you have gone totally, alcohol free, point to a benefit or a change, whether it's work, personal health, your family.
All of those.
All of those?
All
Okay,
of those and many more. But I mean, sleep.
Yeah.
For me, my sleep was really getting interrupted even if I just had a glass of wine or 2.
Yeah.
And so if I'm getting up early in the morning, as I mentioned, if that's such a, foundational part of my morning, if there were days when I couldn't do that or didn't want to do that, well, that would throw off that day and ultimately that week. And it just felt like an interrupter that I wanted to remove. So my patience with my kids is a lot better. I'm sure you've probably found that. So really everything is better without alcohol. I know that's, again, I know that doesn't resonate with everyone, but
Well, thanks for sharing that. That's really cool. So as you know, we met when I was leading Edge Mentorship. None of us are self-made people, right? We've all had people that have stepped into our lives at key points and believed in us, maybe even more than we believed in ourselves. And so as you reflect on your career today, maybe who is a mentor, maybe non-family, that has really impacted you and had an impact or profound effect on your life?
When I was at IU, I was really fortunate and to have Lee Giles as a professor. And if you are in the world of journalism, most people know who Lee Giles is. But for those who don't, he was a very household name. He is the longest standing news director. It was the longest standing news director at Wish TV, 40 years, the news director there, which is it's a big deal because that's a position with a lot of turnover. And so for him to be able to stay the leader of a news station for that long was remarkable. He also hired Jane Pauley. So he had an eye for good talent.
Yeah.
Lee, when I was at IU, I knew about him and just knew right away, this is a person who I need to get to know better. I really need to learn from him. And so he kind of took me under his wing. We then stayed in contact after I left IU, and he was the person who really pushed me to get, when I wanted to be in Indianapolis, he would say, well, go work in Indianapolis then.
Yeah.
And I would say, well, Lee, I have to have a job first.
Yeah.
There has to be a job opening. No, there doesn't. Go knock on the doors of the news. Drive up to Indianapolis from Evansville, knock on the doors, tell them you're there to see the news director. So I did that. I mean, I came up to Indianapolis many times without a meeting and would go to WTHR or Channel 6 or Fox 59 and say, I'm just in town. I have a resume tape here. I'm wondering if the news director has any time. Sometimes they would meet with me. Sometimes they'd pass me on. Sometimes no one would meet with me.
Yeah.
And one time it stuck. It worked. I got in with a news director at Channel 6. He gave me about 5 minutes of his time before he told me to leave, and I gave him my resume tape, and I got a phone call a couple of weeks later that, hey, we have an opening.
Yeah.
Do you want the job?
Wow.
So Lee really
gave you
pushed
that
me.
Nudge. Yeah. That's amazing.
To be aggressive, because it's an industry where being persistent pays off.
Yeah. And you had to have the courage, right, to drive up and kind of put yourself out there. But he kind of gave you that
but more times than not, Dave, I'm telling you, I would call Casey on my way home and say, I just drove 3.5 hours and no one met with me. Or I met for 5 minutes with one news director and I did it and it worked. So another piece of advice maybe to give is just, you might have to go a different angle. Just because there's not a job posted online doesn't mean that there's not a potential opening.
Absolutely. And don't take the first no, right? I've always, if I really want something, I want someone to tell me no 3 times before I just take the first no.
That's a really good way of putting it.
When I worked for the Pacers early on in sales, it was...
You got a lot of no's, I bet.
No's, no's, especially that era. But it's not the current Pacers squad we have. But the first 2 letters of not yet are no. So that was always another reminder of, okay, I'm going to stay persistent here.
Yeah, absolutely.
As we sort of land the plane here, I want to talk a little bit about just your involvement in the community. And, Indianapolis has such a rich history, especially the last 50 years of just civic involvement, civic engagement, and where the city was in the 60s, 70s to where it is today. And so I know you're involved in a number of things, but maybe was there something, an SKL, I know you're an alum, or something like that you would point to that you said, hey, for somebody out there that's listening, I did this in my 20s, or this board, or I caught a break here volunteering. What was something that was a bit of a career accelerator that sort of opened your eyes just to the city and how it worked? Obviously, you had the stint in local government, but what was a career accelerator for you as you reflect on the last 2 decades?
The Stanley K. Lacy Executive Leadership Series, as you mentioned, SKL for short. I tell everyone that if you're looking for a way to get to know the city, to get involved in the city, and also meet a lot of like-minded people, well, not even necessarily like-minded, because we had very healthy disagreements during SKL class sessions, but like-minded in the way that they want to be a leader and they want to give back, I would highly encourage someone to apply for SKL. I'm still on the SKL Advisory Council, so I don't read the applications, but I do try to promote the program whenever I can. It's a 9-month intensive program where you're meeting once a month with your class and you're studying different things about the city. So one month might be focused on public service, and the other might be public safety, and the other might be about education. And in fact, we did one class at the Oaks Academy, which is what attracted me to the school that we now send our kids to. So I've made great friendships through SKL. I've had people show up for me in SKL, write letters of recommendation. It's a fabulous program in our city.
That's great. And I believe you had, was it Judge Sarah Evans Barker was your moderator?
Yeah.
I mean, she's an icon, I feel like, in this state. What's your relationship like with her today? Have you guys been able to stay connected even post SKL?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, we stay connected, and we email occasionally. Sarah, Judge Sarah, will come to some. We had a class reunion a couple of years ago, actually last summer, and she attended. She's got a very busy schedule, but she's able to when she's able to be there, she shows up. And learning from Judge Sarah Evans Barker was absolutely incredible. I mean, she's the kind of person who can have you laughing one minute and crying the next and feeling like what just happened. Like she's just an amazing speaker and teacher and friend. Yeah. And I feel really lucky to have had her as our moderator.
That's great. Talk to us a little bit about, I know you're also active in the Children's Museum Guild. So for those that, obviously we have a world-class children's museum, I think number 1 or 2, depending on the ranking.
One.
One, okay, all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, talk to us about the Guild for those that don't know what that is.
Yeah, so the Children's Museum Guild is an organization of 100 women, and we're all volunteers, and we put on the Haunted House, which happens every October. Yeah. And the Haunted House goes the entire month of October and is the largest fundraising effort for the Children's Museum.
Wow.
So last year, the Guild raised nearly $700,000 for the museum, and that money is then put back into the museum in the way of new exhibits or upgrades. It's for various things at the museum, but it helps keep things moving. And it's been really fun to be involved in the Guild. I've met a lot of really fun people. I mean, as part of our volunteer hours, we haunt in the museum. So in October, you could see me like dressed up as a vampire one night, trying to scare kids. And then
it's spooky. I think I tried to take my kids one year and they were a little too young for it.
Yeah, the lights on is not spooky, but lights off is very scary.
Yeah.
And my kids, when they are a certain age, will be able to haunt with me, so they're really excited about that opportunity.
That's great.
It's a lot of time. It's a lot of volunteer hours, but it's really well worth it for a gem in our community. I mean, we all, again, having children, we use the Children's Museum a lot, so I'm happy to support it.
That's great. Anything else you want us to know just in terms of your civic involvement? I know you're playing a role in the upcoming Final Four that the city's hosting in 2026.
You can tell me more about that.
Co-chairing the Media Relations Committee. Hopefully we'll see the unbiased, the Boilermakers. They've got a great squad coming back. It'd be fun to see Coach Painter win one in the home state. But anything else civically that you want us to call out before we wrap up here?
No, I think that we actually, yes, I will mention, we work with Leadership Indianapolis, and they oversee SKL. Yeah. So I would encourage people to check out Leadership Indianapolis's website to look at when the SKL applications come out. They usually come out around April. But Leadership Indianapolis also has an event called Get On Board. And it's an event where you can go and learn about all different boards, nonprofit boards in the city. It's kind of like a job fair for nonprofit boards. So if you have an interest in something like that, it'd be a great thing for you to go to.
That's great. And that reminds me, somebody told me early on, I think when you're early in your career, you think all of your sort of relationship building needs to be tied to your day job, right? And as I've learned, when you get out and serve, whether it's the Children's Museum Guild or a school board or SKL, you can honestly grow your network as much, if not more, through sort of that volunteer civic engagement. And, while your motivation probably shouldn't be just to win some clients from it, it generally works out, right? Where that comes back to benefit when you're just serving from a place of like, want to give back, want to invest here because it's in my neighborhood or it's a cause that I'm passionate about. So that's really cool that you choose to do that, even with owning a business, running a business, having a young family, and all of those things.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like work when you you enjoy what you're doing and you see the fruits of your labor in another way.
Yeah.
Like in the example of the Children's Museum, when I go in and I'm haunting, I'm not who I am in my day job, and it's fun to get to sort of use that other side of my brain for a little while and do it for a good cause.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, thank you for being a guest today. I'm excited for your future. Now, you have to promise us if you'll come back as a mayor, Hollesapple, or a city councilor
Mayor
or something like that.
Has a nice ring to it.
So since we talked about that a little bit earlier, in all seriousness, thank you for being a guest, and excited to kind of see where things go for you from here for you.
Well, thank you. And I'm so excited that you're putting the time and energy into this podcast, into this space. And I think your audience is really going to benefit. And I'm just excited about new emerging leaders, running the city someday.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.